The day I found out I had 3 months to live wasn't the worst day of my life. That came a week later, when I discovered the woman I loved, the woman who had sobbed in my arms about our stolen future, had a literal countdown on her phone, not to my death, but to the day she'd inherit everything. I can still hear the sound of the hospital door closing behind Dr. Chen. 3 months. Glioblastoma. Inoperable. You hear those words, and for a minute, the world just goes silent. Then, it screams. I'm a structural engineer, a man who builds things to last. But my own structure? Crumbling. I called Maya, my fiancée, from the parking lot. She answered on the second ring, her voice sunshine and optimism, like always. Hey honey, how did the consult go? I told her, and she performed. An Oscar-worthy performance of shock and grief. It was all the right sounds, the catching of the breath, the choked up, no, no. She swore we would fight this, together. That we'd move mountains. It was beautiful. For a week, it was exactly what I needed. But then, I saw the spreadsheet. My life before the diagnosis was, for lack of a better word, beige. Comfortable, predictable, high-earning, and lonely. I was 42, living in a beautiful brownstone in a high-tax state, building bridges and occasionally having dinner with my 2 college friends, Ben and Sarah. She was everything I wasn't. Spontaneous, warm, and utterly magnetic. She laughed at my dry jokes about concrete sheer strength. She was, as I told Ben over a bourbon, a total upgrade. Things moved fast. Maybe too fast, in hindsight. Within 4 months, we were engaged. A modest, 3-carat oval diamond. We'd set the wedding date for next spring, giving us a comfortable, pressure-free year. We opened a joint account for shared expenses, groceries, utilities, her monthly car payment, though I was funding 90% of it. We signed a lease for a small studio space downtown for her to open her own studio. It was a good faith investment in our future. I felt invested. The proposal was a storybook moment on a rooftop. The pictures were perfect. Our life was on a perfect, upward trajectory. Then came the headache that wouldn't quit. And the diagnosis. After the news, Maya insisted on moving into my place immediately. Not just to help, she said, but to cherish every single moment. She'd quit her part-time gig at a chain gym. My only job now is taking care of you, Marcus, she'd said, brushing the hair from my forehead. I amended my will a few days later. It was just a formality, I thought. I didn't have much family. My parents passed years ago. I updated it to name her as my sole beneficiary. My lawyer, a stern, no-nonsense woman named Evelyn, raised an eyebrow. Marcus, I know this is a difficult time, but are you sure you don't want to trust? Maybe a specific split. You're not married yet. The law can be unforgiving. I remember laughing. Evelyn, she's quitting her life to care for me. She's my future. Give her everything. I trust her.
That phrase, I trust her, it sounds so idiotic now. The change in Maya was subtle at first. She was still attentive, but there was a new efficiency to her care. She'd schedule my meds, manage calls, and she even took over the shared laptop to organize my medical bills. One Saturday morning, 3 weeks after the diagnosis, I was having a particularly lucid moment.
I went to the kitchen to make coffee, but she was already up, sitting at the dining table, bathed in the soft morning light. She was too engrossed in the laptop screen to hear me approach. I saw the glow of the screen reflected in the glass. It wasn't medical bills. It was an Excel spreadsheet. My blood ran cold, but I stayed calm. My engineer's brain kicked in. Don't react. Observe. Collect data. The top of the sheet read, Project Sunrise. Underneath, in neat columns, were my assets. Row 1, brownstone value, 1 point, quick payout. Row 4, studio lease, $8,000 month. Note, transfer deed to single ownership. Need Marcus's signature. Row 5, the final row, and the one that actually made me stumble. A countdown timer, ticking down to 74 days, 16 hours. The column header? Expected date of fund access. It wasn't a schedule for my final months, it was a liquidation schedule. The countdown wasn't to a medical miracle, it was to the activation of the sole beneficiary clause. I cleared my throat. She slammed the laptop shut as if it had slapped her. Her face went from focused calculation to instant, saccharine panic. Marcus, honey, what are you doing up? You should be resting. I was calm. Too calm. Just making coffee, my love. What's Project Sunrise? Her eyes darted around. Oh, that. It's just a personal finance tracker. For the studio. Planning, you know. Future stuff. It's boring. Don't worry your pretty little head about it. The casual condescension was like a slap. I took the lie, a dry smile touching my lips. Of course. Just planning the future. Good job, Maya. You're so efficient. I walked away and into my office, shutting the door. The moment the lock clicked, I wasn't a dying man anymore. I was a man who had to survive long enough to expose a viper. I looked at the ticking time bomb in her ledger, 74 days. I had a new deadline. The rising tension, the strategic retaliation. My first call was to Evelyn, my lawyer. I kept the conversation clinical. Evelyn, remember that will we signed? I need to make some amendments. A completely new document, in fact. Effective immediately. Marcus, are you sure? The paperwork is filed. This is going to raise a red flag. Raise it high, I said. I'm taking everything out of the will. I want it all placed in a revocable living trust. I'll be the sole trustee. My two friends, Ben and Sarah, will be the beneficiaries. Not Maya. Evelyn, sensing the shift in my tone, dropped the gentle professionalism. What happened, Marcus? I gave her the concise 4-sentence version, including the phrase Project Sunrise and the expected date of fund access. Evelyn's gasp over the phone was the most satisfying sound I'd heard all week. That is cold-blooded, Marcus, but this is good. A revocable living trust is exactly what we need. It's private, and it bypasses probate. It also makes you the legal owner of all assets while you're alive. You can change it on a whim. I was now performing for her too. I was the weak, ailing, grateful fiancé. Every morning, she'd bring me a smoothie and kiss my forehead, cooing about how much she loved me. Every evening, I'd watch her text on her phone. I suspected another man, or perhaps the financial planner who was helping her clear my estate, and I'd feel not anger, but a profound, detached pity. She was wasting her performance on an audience of one who knew all the lines. I got the new trust finalized within the week. Evelyn and I met at a discreet coffee shop, and I signed the new paperwork, redirecting my entire estate, the house, the portfolio, the insurance, to Ben and Sarah, who would, in turn, hold it for a small foundation I was secretly establishing. But I needed proof of her motive. I needed to see her hand in the cookie jar. The opportunity came with the studio lease. She needed my signature to change the deed to her name, claiming it was for liability protection since she'd be running the business. She put the document in front of me, a pen ready. Just one quick signature, honey. Then we can go back to resting. I looked at her, my eyes slightly unfocused, playing the part of the confused, sick man. Of course, my love. Where do I sign? I signed the lease transfer document, but underneath the signature line, in a handwriting that looked exactly like hers, I had subtly forged her initials and a small note. Fund transfer complete on 72 days. She didn't. She took the papers, gave me a triumphant kiss, and left for the notary. 72 hours later, I heard her on the phone in the living room. It wasn't a soothing tone. It was a business transaction. Yes, Mr. Henderson, the lease is officially transferred. The final step is just waiting for the funds. Everything is set up on my end. I've already put a deposit down on the new Mercedes. It'll be a good look for the studio opening, don't you think? She laughed, a cold, hard sound. That was the trigger. The brazen greed was too much. I was sitting at the kitchen table, calmly eating a sandwich when she hung up. I looked up. A Mercedes. That's an expensive choice for a studio car, isn't it? Her face immediately tightened. Oh, Marcus, you're listening to my calls. That's not fair. I was just talking to the dealership. I'm thinking about a cheaper used car. No, you weren't, Maya. You were talking to the financial planner you've hired to help you liquidate my assets. You were talking about Project Sunrise. The air left the room. Her smile evaporated, replaced by a look of sheer, calculating hatred. The mask was finally, gloriously off. You saw it, she stated, her voice flat. Not a question, a fact. I saw the countdown, Maya. 74 days, down to the hour. And I saw the note you made on the studio transfer. Fund transfer complete on 72 days. You were ready to be rich, weren't you? She walked toward me, no longer the loving fiancé, but a predator who'd been cornered. And what are you going to do, Marcus? You're a dead man walking. You have no family. You signed the will. You signed the lease. You're weak and you're sick. You can't fight me. In 2 months, it's all mine. I pushed my plate aside, picked up my phone, and dialed a number. Evelyn, it's Marcus. I need you to initiate the final steps. Yes, the police report for the studio lease fraud. I need you here in 1 hour. I looked at Maya, who was now trembling with a mix of fury and fear.
You're wrong, Maya. I was weak. But now I'm fighting. The will you saw? I replaced it with a new one, a fully funded, revocable living trust 2 weeks ago. You are not a beneficiary. You're not getting the house, the portfolio, the insurance, or a single dime. Her jaw dropped. You're lying. I'm not. And about that studio lease you ran to the notary with? You committed fraud, Maya. I caught the forged initial and the handwritten note you thought was yours.
I was never signing over the lease. I was signing the evidence of your intent to commit financial fraud against a vulnerable person. The notary's office now has a file, and the police are on their way to collect the documents. You're not getting a Mercedes, Maya. You're getting a court date. The look on her face when the doorbell rang was my ultimate victory. It wasn't the police. It was Evelyn, with a man in a crisp suit, a process server. He handed her a thick sheaf of papers. Maya Simmons, you are hereby served with a temporary restraining order, prohibiting you from accessing any of Marcus Vance's accounts, properties, or electronic devices, and a notice to vacate the premises within 24 hours. Good luck in court. Maya packed a single suitcase and was gone by the end of the day. The silence in the brownstone was deafening, but it was a clean silence, the kind that follows a storm. The next few months were not easy. The glioblastoma was unforgiving, but I wasn't alone. Ben and Sarah moved in, taking turns to care for me. I was dying, yes, but I was dying on my own terms, not as the final stepping stone in a callous financial plan. The police investigation led to charges of fraud, attempted financial exploitation of the elderly, a generous interpretation of my 42 years, but one Evelyn championed, and breach of contract for the studio lease. She fought it, of course, denying everything, claiming I was delusional due to my illness. But the evidence, the trust documents, the forged lease, the Project Sunrise spreadsheet Evelyn and I managed to legally obtain, was irrefutable. The final, pathetic chapter was a small settlement I allowed Evelyn to offer. I would drop the criminal charges for fraud if she agreed to sign a document admitting her intent and permanently relinquishing any future claims to my estate. She took it. Better to walk away with nothing than a criminal record. She vanished back into the beige noise of the city, one expensive, lost lesson. I lived 4 months past my 3-month deadline. I spent that time wisely. I set up the Vance Structural Integrity Foundation, using my entire estate to fund scholarships for young engineers from disadvantaged backgrounds. My bridges would last, and so would my legacy. On my final afternoon, Ben sat beside me, reading aloud from an old copy of my favorite engineering magazine. I asked him if he and Sarah were happy with how things turned out. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile. We're happy, Marcus. You taught us the ultimate lesson in structural integrity, not just in steel and concrete, but in the people you choose to rely on. I closed my eyes, reflecting on the whirlwind. I learned that the greatest weakness isn't a fatal disease, it's a profound, reckless trust. I was a man who planned for every contingency in a construction project, but never for betrayal in my own home. My dry humor got me through the chaos. My methodical, engineer's mind saved my legacy. If there's a lesson to leave behind, it's this. Always sign your own paperwork. Never trust a performance. And if your significant other is overly efficient with your death, remember, you still have the power of your own signature. And you won't believe how peaceful it is to go out knowing you've outsmarted the person who thought she'd outsmarted you.